Hello again. Thanks for clicking on to another podcast of Jiffy and Stubbsy. The background to this, dual code rugby star Jonathan Davis came up with the idea of talking to people in sport that really have an opinion that it's worth listening to. This is our second series of podcasts. Grateful thanks to Kerry London, one of the leading insurance companies in the country, for sponsoring this series. And for any advice, it's good to go and talk to them. Well, Jiffy, we have had some terrific guests so far. Today is absolutely no different. He captained England to Grand Slams, to a World Rugby Union World Cup final, played for the British Lions. England really emerged under this man's captaincy, and I'm delighted he's agreed to join us today. Will Carling. Will, thank you for spending some time with us today. First of all, I'm keen to hear, when you two lined up against each other and you're looking across to the other line and you can, as opponents to each other, do you have any memories of that or any anecdotes of coming up against each other as opponents?
Yeah, I have. Taken years of counselling. So, Stubbsy, my first game at Twickenham was against the Welsh. Obviously, we lost because that's what we did. But I remember him and Robert Jones. Jonesy came out, and I mean there were two things. They strutted out, right? And it was either because the shorts were so tight that was the only way they could move, or there was just that they looked at us like we're going to beat you because we're Wales and you're England, and they had mullets, the most unbelievable mullets, both of them, and and they did beat us. And but I always remember him just it was just his swagger and the fact that he was way too good.
Shut up, Will.
No, you were. And do you know what? And without getting emotional too soon, my last game was at Cardiff, and he was there, and Rob Andrew, who's probably one of my closest mates, for some reason had come on the pitch as well. I'm not sure why. He'd been loitering somewhere, but it was for me was a very special way to finish.
Yeah, it was a great. I think the last day was really special. I think England were kind of building up a really good side then, and they beat us quite convincingly. So it's never nice to lose any international match, especially against England at Cardiff Farms Park. So, but it made it a special, fond moment when there's a photo of me, Will, and Rob Andrew. So, but the one thing when you play Twickenham, I didn't have much time to worry about Will because I had the English back row trying to kill me all afternoon, so I didn't really worry about the backs. But
you were taunting them.
Well, that's the way. It's like a bull. It's like a matador with a bull. The trouble is, if the bull catches you, you're dead, right? So that's the way I try to play. But the first time, I think when I really met Will was we played this together in Glasgow, didn't we?
Yes.
And then he was a really young lad. I don't think had he been captain or just been captain? No. I'm not sure. No. So we turned up playing. Not in those days. We rocked up a couple of days before, one training session for the Barbarians, and then Friday night we played. We played Glasgow Academicals on a Saturday, like a charity or a memorial game or something. So then we went out Friday night. We had an absolute skinful, and we missed Will out with a missed one pass most of the first half. So then till he kind of regained his senses, and he had a good game then. But no, we've always had. And
Stubbsy, what he fails to tell you, right? What he fails to tell you is he had been on his, boot money from being in the valleys, right?
Shut up.
And then the poor student turns up from Durham, right? And is blown away because Jonathan Dave's there and there's a few others. Gets left with the bar bill, doesn't he? Gets left with the bar bill while they're sort of just giggling in the back. It's just like student. It took me another 3 years to pay that off.
If I told bring the receipt, if you show me the receipt, I'd have given you half.
Well, he did the same to me at the Atlantic Bar with Long Island iced teas. Him and a few others did exactly the same to me with Long Island iced teas. Will, you mentioned Durham then.
Yeah.
You studied at Durham University and you have a degree in psychology, the science of the mind. I'm just keen to hear about how does that apply to elite sport? By that I mean, surely you can use it in regards to captaincy.
Well, you would have liked to have thought so, wouldn't you? But it passed me by. Do you know what? I loved it. I'm not sure if you ever went to talk to the psychology department at Durham. They're as fond of me as I am of them. But it was great fun. I remember my thesis, which is probably the only bit of work I did, which was stress in sport, military. It was, how people react under stress, and it was great. And you can actually, but do you know what, Stubbs? I've learned more from some of the psychologists I've met since about top high-end sport, and there's a huge amount. I just genuinely still believe, and I'm not talking about me, the difference in sport at the very top level is mostly in the mind. I think they are, say you look at the rugby as a world, Jiffy and I walk in, most of them there's 4 or 5 teams fit enough to win a World Cup. There's four or five, maybe there's 3 or 4 who are good enough. It's a mental, the teams who get it right mentally are the ones who win. And the All Blacks have managed to do that consistently for bloody decades. But it's but even them, if you look at them in the last 10 or 15 years, a huge amount of their time is spent on the mental side of the game.
I think they have to, because there's so much pressure on New Zealand that, you look at, they call them chokers in the World Cup, and they should have won. Maybe they were favourites for every World Cup, I can imagine, and they lost, lost to France, and they lost to Australia on a couple of occasions. So, and I think, is that when they brought them in to get over that hurdle? Will, is it? Yeah. Because when we were playing, we didn't have any sports psychologists. We were amateur, so I didn't. Is it? And do you agree? Some players need it, and then other players don't need it, or do you think everyone would benefit from it?
I think. Well, I think it changes, right, Jiffy? When and I hate going back. When we were playing, but you worked. You had a different perspective on life. So I think you had experiences that the current players don't have. They come from academies. Yeah. And the vast majority of them are told what to do from a very early age, and the vast majority of them don't question, challenge, and they're not encouraged to be inquisitive, to think, to be proactive. So I think in terms of the current generation, I think a lot of them can benefit from the psychological part of it, learning how to get themselves in the right emotional state. But even back in our day and generation since, I agree with you. There are some. It's like anything, isn't it? There are some people who naturally do it, who naturally work out how to get themselves up for games in the right frame of mind, and there are some who struggle and who can learn, just like you learn speed. How to work on your speed, how to work on your strength, your skills. The mind is something you can work on as well.
And then you're now involved in the English setup. What exactly are you doing? With England.
It was great. It was one of the young guys the other day. We were walking past me, Benno. He's a lovely guy. And he went, Will, he said, can I ask you? He said, what actually do you do? And we both stood there for a while. It's a very good question. We didn't come up with an answer. But it's... No, I'm in there trying to help them with the leadership group in terms of how they develop as leaders and trying to mentor that group. And I think it's, as we said, I'm biased, but I think the same with the Welsh. They're good guys, they're really good raw material. They're just, very few of them are being encouraged to develop leadership stuff at club level. It's bizarre. I think there's a professional sport where professionals, you're encouraged just to do what you're told. That's being professional. You're not encouraged to think about how you could push it that bit further. How could you improve this? How can we get this a little bit better? And I think, so Eddie's very keen that they do. And I think most people are of the belief that, you've got to hand over responsibility to the team, the players, and they've got to have the ability to take that on.
Do you give them, go on, right?
In some ways, is it what happened when when England emerged under your captaincy? Because I remember reading that you looked at it and you thought, we've got to change, and you tried to instill that change, did instill that change in England. So are there parallels in the overall subject that we're talking about? To be the best, you need to do things, and under your captaincy, England did, and they emerged.
Stubbsy, look, I'm not being humble or whatever. You know, I think there's way too much put on my captaincy. I think you had a group of characters who just needed to be listened to, and basically my role was, you know, I thought was to listen to them, to get them to think and tell me what we needed to change, and that was it. Yeah, there's no doubt we needed to change, but they weren't my ideas. They were the players' ideas. But I think, say with this lot, they are a more talented bunch of individuals than we were, and I think it's basically, you know, the confidence and maybe a few tools for them to actually start taking on that ability to lead and drive the team. And I think they've got all the raw materials. They are a really good group of guys, and I love it. It's I'm like a kid in a sweet shop.
I can imagine, because there's different characters. I can see that Itoji and Ben Youngs, and then certainly Owen Farrell. You know, they're all kind of real different characters, aren't they? You know, and it's the same thing when you became captain of England. You know, you look at the old school, and then you came in fresh-faced, you know, university graduate, ex-army, and they must have thought, who is this bloke now who's gonna? But that's the respect, and that's I think, wasn't it Cook that put you in charge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Diggs, and I'm thinking, right, that was I think it was a great move for him, you know, to do that, and he must have had immense respect for you, Will, because I think being English captain in any sport is a fantastic position to be, right? But also, if things don't go well, I think it also can be the worst position to be, because the media, you know, just turns on, you know, the English, you know, managers, players, captains. So, you know, and I'm thinking, 91, you know, imagine, well, you'd have been a Sir by now if you'd have won that 91 World Cup, wouldn't you? And you should have won it, really.
Well, do you know what, Jiffy? It's what used to frustrate me, and I know we've mentioned this, was I grew up, and then, you know, England's your dream, and you play, you luckily, you know, you get picked, and that was my dream. But you're not allowed to be you're not allowed to be passionate as an Englishman. You're not allowed to talk about winning, you know, because you're English. And so the Welsh, the Scots, whatever they say, you know, there's that whole, oh, you're arrogant. As soon as you're passionate, you're arrogant. And I'm like, and I just used to struggle with that, because I think, no, you know, I want us to win. This is what I dreamed of playing. And why can't we be passionate about being English? And I think there's the whole, and it's joking aside, something. It's like there's a whole, there's the empire, and there's a whole, look, you know, we don't want to win too often. That's awful. You know, and you think, rubbish. It's about winning. So there's all that goes on with being an England captain. But you think it's, and Owen is very much a winner. That's, you know, he's got an intense focus on winning, and I love that.
You mentioned there values and perception. You were both central figures when rugby union wrestled with the advent of professionalism. Jiffy, I remember coming to Wales to make a film with you about when you were considering moving to rugby league. And I learned so much about the issue by talking to you. Will, you questioned famously England's leadership at the RFU with a very famous quote. But can I ask, I've always wanted to ask you, was that comment off camera, or was it meant for the programme? Because I've read so many different things about this. Was it off camera? Was it an aside? Or did you say it?
I got interviewed by Greg Dyke, who went on to head up the BBC, didn't he?
He did.
So I was sitting opposite, and I knew what the programme was going to be about, something. I knew what they were after, right? And, you know, I'm not bright, but I thought, you know, I'll tread a careful line. And I had trodden a very careful line with him. And he said, great, thanks, Will. And I took my microphone off. I remember turning it off, put it on the table. And I walked past him, and the camera was behind him. And as I walked past, he went, "Come on, Will." He said, "What if the game does go professional?" And I just laughed. I was behind the camera. I turned around and I went, "I don't know, Greg." I said, "But hey, you know, you wouldn't need 57 old farts to run it, would you?" And just laughed and just walked out. And so it was not as far as, you know, and I remember when the media was going nuts, and I was being rung up by, you know, the guy saying, I didn't say that in the interview. I did not say, I would remember because I'd know exactly what was going to happen if I'd said it. But he had also left his microphone on, which for me, you just think, Greg, that's, in my book, that's cheap. You know, it's just, I did the interview for you, and stupid of me, no doubt stupid, right? But I wasn't hugely impressed with him, I must say.
No.
But there we go.
I couldn't believe at the time, and if you go back to when you were thinking of turning professional as well, I couldn't just believe at the time. And it's great to talk to you two today in a new world, because it did appear like values were in the dark ages, and it's great they've changed.
Well, it was odd. It was odd for us because, you know, again, international, we played and didn't, you know, earn any money. And you think in all packed stadiums, television rights, everything. So, but we grew up in our era. We were amateur sportsmen. Hey, you know, we were unlucky. Maybe we should have gone into football or tennis or something like that. But then once it kind of was going that way, you know, I remember what really soured me with the Northern Hemisphere rugby when we went to New Zealand. First of all, for the World Cup, and secondly, then we went back there again. Thank you very much for that. I'm still scarred, you know, like standing behind the post when it's in Dunedin, when it's hailstones that big hitting on the head, and this is a nightmare. But it's when we came back, they were semi-professionals. They weren't paid for playing. But I remember Sean Fitzpatrick saying the only thing they got to worry about is the rugby. Everything else, they have time off for training. You know, I think the companies they work for would be reimbursed by their sponsors. So that's what really hurt me, because I then knew that the Northern Hemisphere would never, you know, be on the same level as the Southern Hemisphere. You know, and I think from 91, it took us 12 years, 2003, to win England to win the World Cup. But, you know, when the game went professional, I think it's fairer for everyone, and there's no excuses now. Whereas then I was really disappointed, and that's why I went north, to be honest, because I didn't feel that we were going to, you know, win international competitions. And as a player, I played rugby to win games, to win international matches. And it wasn't the fact that, you know, they weren't getting paid. Well, I didn't care about getting paid, but we should have had the same treatment as them and allowed to train as well. That's the big thing. And
do you know what, Stubbs? That's exactly what our argument was. We toured South Africa in '94, and the first game we played in Durban, and it was under floodlights. And I remember they scored against us, and up on the scoreboard flashed the winger's bonus for scoring. And it was one of those moments where you're going, all right, yeah, bonus, of course, yeah, in the great amateur game that we play. And our argument, therefore, with the committee guys who were on that tour was going, how can you tell us it's an amateur game? Yeah. And actually, all we're arguing with you about is give us a chance to win. Make it a level playing field. It's either amateur or it's professional. But at the moment, you know, it's unfair that we play against these guys. And just like Jiffy, you want to beat them, but it's like... you can't. But we had World Cup, but we had to sign a form to say we wouldn't make any income from rugby. This is just before the World Cup started. First game with New Zealand, Italy. We signed a form to say, right, Ray Williams, we're not going to make any revenue from rugby for the next 12 months or whatever. And next day we sat down, and the advert that came on before the first World Cup game ever was John Kerwin advertising acne cream. That was it. We're thinking, what's going on here? But then when I flipped it, then I remember it was a great story. Remember Brett Papworth played for Australia, a great player, right? He went to play for Eastern Suburbs in rugby league in Sydney, right? And he was very unlucky. He's a great player, but he broke his arm and broke his leg. Then I think he broke his jaw a couple of times. And I remember that an advert came on television. I was down there. It says Mitsubishi cars.
not even Brett Papworth can break this. And it was just so different, so funny. But I really enjoyed playing against Will and England. It was great for us because we night out in London, which we never did. We had it was a great atmosphere, and great competition. So, and the best thing is, hopefully the current players, we've been friends ever since. You stay in touch, and I think that's what they miss, Will. I think maybe that's what you've been brought in. I think outside, the more of a rounded person. I think Will comes in. He's had all the experiences of life, and then he kind of gives that to the younger player, which is, I think, is a great move by Eddie Jones to get Will involved.
Time has beaten us, but there's a lot more to come from Will Carling in this edition of Jiffy and Stubbsy. More from Will be released over the next 48 hours, and he has a lot more to tell us. See you soon. Bye for now. And thanks for listening to Jiffy and Stubbsy. Hope you'll join us again. Please hit the subscribe button.